Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Iran didn't fire a missile. It didn't drop a bomb. But what it just threatened to do might hit harder than any warhead. Iran may be about to do something unimaginable, unthinkable. That is, to close or restrict the Strait of Hormuz, the lifeline of global oil, the corridor that fuels 20% of the planet's daily energy, and the pressure point that, if squeezed, could trigger an economic heart attack. And the world could now be staring at an oil shock it's not ready for. So is Iran about to pull the plug on global energy or just pull the world's strings? Did Trump just trigger an oil war the world can't win? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. It's being called the ultimate oil ultimatum. This week, Iran's parliament voted in favor of closing the Strait of Hormuz, the most valuable, vulnerable waterway on Earth. This was in response to US airstrikes on 3 of its nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The final green light? That rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council. But here's the thing. When Iran's military men draft the plan and the Ayatollah's men approve it, it's usually not a bluff. So what happens if Iran actually does it? What happens if a nation under siege becomes the one that brings the world to its knees? Because that's what a closure of Hormuz would do. This isn't just a shipping lane, it's a lifeline. And if that lifeline is cut, oil prices could soar to $100 a barrel or more overnight. Let's break it down for you. The Strait of Hormuz is approximately 167 kilometers long, narrowing to just about 33 kilometers at its narrowest point. But every day, more than 17 million barrels of oil pass through it. That's roughly a third of the world's oil on water. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, they all depend on this narrow slit between Iran and Oman to get their oil out. No Hormuz, no oil. And without oil, the global economy doesn't stumble, it crashes. And that's exactly what makes this moment so dangerous. Because this isn't just about Tehran versus Washington DC anymore. It's Iran versus the global order.
So ministers are very much focused on the diplomatic solution and also the concerns of retaliation and this war escalating are huge. Especially closing of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran is something that it would be extremely dangerous and not good for anybody.
ホルムズ海峡の封鎖の可能性等について予断を持ってお答えすることは差し控えますが、政府といたしましては我が国のエネルギー安定供給への影響などについて引き続き高い緊張感を持って注視をしていく考えでございます。
And it's doing it with one finger over the panic button of the global economy. This isn't the first time Iran has threatened to shut down Hormuz. But this time, the context is darker, deadlier, and far more real. The US just bombed Iranian nuclear facilities. Israel is at war in Gaza. Syria's Assad is gone. The region is in flames. And Iran is no longer playing defense. It's daring the world to push back. And the Strait of Hormuz? That's its nuclear option without the news. So what would it look like if they actually do it? Would they roll out warships, lay underwater mines, deploy fast attack boats to harass every oil tanker in sight? Possibly all of the above. Because to close the strait, Iran doesn't need to announce war. It just needs to make passage dangerous. And fear will do the rest. Already markets are reacting. Global oil analysts are warning of a 70% spike in oil prices in a worst-case scenario. $80, $90, even $100 a barrel. That's if the closure lasts more than a few days. some hedge funds have started piling into oil futures. Insurance premiums on tankers in the Gulf have shot up, and navies from France, the UK and the US are on alert. Now, while the West watches nervously, India feels it, because almost 40% of India's crude oil, over 2 million barrels per day, comes through the Strait of Hormuz. We get our oil from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Iran itself. And if Iran chokes off the strait, those supplies choke too. Sure, India has diversified. Russia now provides a large share, and Qatar's LNG could be rerouted. But here's the bottom line. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, India bleeds rupees. Higher oil import bills, spike in domestic fuel prices, inflation that hits everything from your morning milk to your Uber ride. And while the government says it's manageable, markets know better.
The escalation of tensions in the Middle East was not entirely unexpected. In fact, we had foreshadowed this escalation, and the government under the Honorable Prime Minister has been consistently and periodically reviewing the situation, including the possibility of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. We had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that India consumes daily, about 1.5 and 2 million only come through the Straits of Hormuz. We import roughly 4 million barrels through other routes, and our companies, the oil marketing companies, have enough stocks. Most of them have stocks up to 3 weeks. One of them has in fact 25 days stocks. And we are also confident that we can increase the supply of crude through other routes should the situation so warrant.
So this isn't just a West Asia story. This is our story now. And the story of a world that built its economy on a single narrow waterway, controlled by a country that's now looking for revenge. And here's what makes it all the more twisted. Iran itself depends on the Strait of Hormuz for its own oil exports. It has a terminal at Jask, right at the edge of the strait. So if it closes the strait, it also blocks its own income. Why would they risk that? Because Tehran knows what Washington DC knows. The fear of economic collapse is more powerful than a bomb. And threatening the world's oil artery is the fastest way to reclaim geopolitical relevance. And don't forget China. Beijing is Iran's biggest buyer of oil. So if Hormuz shuts, China panics. Beijing may not say it on camera, but it will likely pressure Iran behind closed doors. Because China's worst nightmare is an oil shock right in the middle of its economic slowdown.
及其附近水域是重要的国际货物和能源贸易通道，维护该地区安全稳定，符合国际社会的共同利益。中方呼吁国际社会加大努力，推动冲突降级，防止地区局势动荡，对全球经济发展造成更大的影响。
So the big question now is, will Iran go through with it? Experts say a total blockade is unlikely because it would invite Western retaliation, especially from the US Fifth Fleet, stationed just miles away in Bahrain. And Iran knows that, which is why the likely strategy is something far more dangerous than total closure. Controlled chaos, a tanker accident, a drone swarm near a shipping lane, a fake mine alert, just enough to spook the markets, but not enough to trigger war. Because in the game of oil brinkmanship, fear is the fuel, and right now, Iran's tank is full. But here's what you need to remember in this new world order. It's not nukes or armies that control power. It's choke points. It's cyber routes, semiconductor fabs and straits like the Hormuz.
Not completely shutting down Hormuz Strait, but they are thinking about making some limitation on Hormuz Strait and make some long-term limitation there, because every country is in the region and outside of region should know that the country which was responsible for the safety of this region was Iran. You know that in the Middle Eastern country, in many years, we faced a terrorist attack, terrorist group, and the only country who actually fight against terrorism was Iran in Syria, in Iraq, and everyone in the region knows that Iran was the main actor who were against and fighting against these chaos and terrorism. The first step is American allies and absolutely Israelis. But maybe after that, if we see that our neighbors would allow Israeli and also the U.S. Actually use their soil and their airspace to attack Iran, they would actually take this responsibility up their board.
The next few days are critical. Iran's Supreme National Security Council could meet as early as this weekend. If they authorize even a partial disruption, oil prices will jump, global shipping lanes will shift, and the world economy will feel the tremors. Not because Iran is strong, but because the world is too dependent on a few kilometers of water. And we all know it. So as the Western leaders line up behind Israel and Trump talks tough from the sidelines, Iran has picked its weapon of choice. Not a missile, not a drone, but a Strait. And the message to the world: we can still bring you to your knees. Thank you for watching Statecraft.